I'm about to start my static walk cycle homework. So what I mean by static is our character will be walking in place and then we'll cycle the animation so he looks like he's walking forever. The character is at the origin, so I've made a floor plane so we can check to make sure that his feet aren't cutting through the floor. And I've blocked off the floor plane here on reference. So I have made a free reference image. So I went up to create and free image plane. So the reason I did this is so we can select this image plane and move it around. So if I select it here, you can see that the alpha gain, it's usually at 1, which makes it a really bright panel. So I've dulled it down a little bit to 0.4, so it's not quite so bright and it's not distracting from our character. So the reason I made a free one is because we can move it around and scale it. And it looks a little bit small in this view, but I'm actually not going to be working in my perspective view. I'm actually going to be working in my side view. So in order for my reference image to read in the right direction and him to walk forward, I went to orthographic, and under new I went and I got a left hand camera. So I'm going to go back and so this is my left hand view. Now I'll turn the grid on for a minute. So here is our 0 line here. There's a floor plane too. And you can see that our image plane is a much larger size and I'm able to see it and read it while I work. So we're ready to go. So my walk cycle here is going to be a 32 frame walk cycle, which will give me a little bit of a slower, more casual walk. We could do a 24 frame cycle as well, where it goes 0, 12, 24. It doesn't matter. 24 is a little bit of a faster, more purposeful walk. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set my frames. So my first frame will be frame 0 and my last frame will be frame 32. So the reason I'm doing this is because frame 0 and 32 are going to be the exact same pose. And if I loop my animation, I will play the same pose twice and that gives me a little pop in my animation. So what we need to do at the end of this is to drop 1 frame. I'm going to drop frame 0. You could drop frame 32. It doesn't matter. The nice thing about starting on frame 0 is all of my poses will be on even frames. So my pose will be on 0, 16, 32, 8 and 24, 4 and 12. It's just easier. If you start on 1 and you add 16 frames, then you're going 1 and 17 and 33. It's just easier to keep it on even numbers. We're not doing 2D animation, we're doing 3D animation, so we can set our frames on any numbers we wish. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do our contact poses. So contact pose is our first pose where we have the right foot forward. Our second contact pose will be left foot forward. And our third contact pose will be exactly the same as the first pose with the right foot forward. Before you start, if your character does not come with a selection set for selecting his main body controls, you're going to want to make one and make a shelf button. So I've already got a shelf button here for Tuna, so he's ready to go. So we do not need to key every single control. We don't need to key every finger or hair controls or his face controls and all of that. What I need is I need his root or cog, center of gravity, his hips, his IK feet, his spine, his shoulders and arms, and you can throw the head in as well. My reference here from the John Williams book, this is a 2D reference, so it's a little bit more extreme than we're going to go in 3D. For example, I'm not going to flop his hand backwards when he swings his arm back. We're going to keep it a little more towards the real world, so your wrist is usually pretty stiff, so you don't flip your hand back when you walk. And we don't swing our arms back quite this far, because we have our scapula or our shoulder blades that keeps you from swinging your arms too far back. So we can swing our arms very far forward, but we're going to be a little bit more conservative when we swing our arms back. Also, some of the foot flipping here, We're probably not going to rotate our feet around quite this much, because the more you rotate your feet, the more you have to rotate your feet back around. And if you don't have a lot of time to do that, it's going to make very fast moves that are going to be very distracting. So I'm just going to follow my guide here. So my screen front foot, my foreground foot here, is going to be the one that's forward. So I'm going to pull this forward a little bit. So I'm not going to make his stride quite as wide as it is here. So I'm going to be a little bit more conservative. So I want to go a little bit more than the length of a foot plus a quarter or a half. So maybe the length of his foot and a half as a stride. I don't want to go a lot wider than that. Okay, so his feet are going to pull up, but that's fine because we're going to take his root and we're going to pull it down. So I'm going to pull it down just so I see that knee pop forward, and then I'm going to stop right there. So the next thing I want to do, because it's going to affect the length, it doesn't affect the length of the legs, but it affects how much slack you have in your feet, is I'm going to go to his hip swinger control, which is right here. I'm going to change to our perspective for a second. There we go. So this is his hip swinger control. So I am going to rotate his hips forward to go with the leading foot. So his hips are going to go this way. So I'm not going to go too far when I rotate them forward, just a little bit. But you can see how it loosens up his legs, and now that leg has more bend on it. This leg has less tension on it. So I don't want to twist it around so much I can see his butt from a side view. That's too much. So 43 degrees, that's way too much. Let's try something more like 20 degrees. Okay, that's better. All right, so I'm going to go back to our orthographic left. All right, so I'm going to grab his back foot control, and I'm going to roll his foot. So I'm going to roll it to the ball of the foot. Now, when your character has IK feet on the ground, you have a whole bunch of special IK controls for rolling the foot and rocking the foot and swiveling on your toes. And what this does is the IK, so on these IK feet, the IK box is telling your foot where the floor is. So you're going to rock the foot, or roll the foot, we're going to roll the foot on the ground. So I don't want to roll it so much. We're making a 90-degree angle here. But I do want to roll it up some so that there's a slight bend in the knee. We're trying to avoid pops like this. So you see when the leg just pops straight and the knees practically go backwards, it just goes pop straight. We're trying to avoid those. We need to give it enough roll to bend the knees a bit. Okay, now on this foot, if I roll it, that's about as far as we can go, so I'm actually not going to roll it to get on the heel there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this is the last second that the foot is on the floor, so I'm actually going to rotate it in X. Because you saw, I'm going to go back a second here. So if I roll it here, you can see how it bends the knee up, and then it's like, well, how could I fix this? Too much bend in the knee. How could I possibly fix that? My only option is to pull his feet out wider, and I don't want to give him this ridiculously long stride. It's going to look a little bit weird. So rolling is not my best choice. Yes, it gets the foot up at an angle, but it's not the best choice. So I'm going to go with rotating the foot. And yes, the thing is, when you rotate it, it will allow the foot to cut through the floor, so his ankle, or the very heel of his shoe is cutting through a little bit. I'm going to let that go for right now. Okay, so I'm going to set that. Alright, so I'm going to hop back to my perspective a little bit. So when you're walking, your arms are swinging the opposite of your legs. So if his right leg, or which leg is this? It is the right leg. Okay. So if your right leg is forward, your left shoulder is going to be forward. So what we're going to do is our hips are rotated at 20 degrees here. So we're going to take his spine, and I'm going to grab all 3 spine controls. And I'm going to give them a little bit of rotation the opposite direction. And I'm not going to overdo this too much because I've got 3 controls. So they're all adding rotation on top of each other. So I'm going to keep it small. And I'm going to give him a little bit of negative rotation here on his chest. Okay, so I'm going to pose the arms down to the side here for a second. Now, this is not the most extreme on the arm swing. Actually, the most extreme on the arm swing is the down pose, which we're not going to do for another 2 videos. So I'm going to put this arm back a little bit, but not that much. I may even have the lower arm come in a little bit. So this arm I'm going to have go forward, and my lower arm I'm going to have it come up a little bit, and I might actually have it cross in front a little bit. I'm going to pull his shoulders up just a tiny bit. Again, this is not the most extreme. So in the most extreme swing, we're going to have his shoulders up a little bit, and when his arms are swinging in the halfway point, we're going to drop his shoulders a little bit, and then we're going to raise them on the next extreme. Okay, so on his head, there is a control called Global, and it's not turned on right now. So as you can see, if I get straight in front of him, when I rotated his spine, his head also went with it. So I'm going to turn this Global up to 10. And what that's going to do is it's going to lock his head forward. And I'm just going to leave it for there. So I can throw in a little bit of wrists right now, or I can wait a little bit. Again, I don't want to do this when his arms go back. Put this down a little bit. You could flare this up. So swinging it up forward is okay. Swinging it up behind him looks weird. Okay, so I've done a whole pass all the way around him. So I'm going to go ahead and choose his button here for all his body controls. And go ahead and hit S. Now the very first thing I'm going to do, because frame 0 and frame 32 have to be exactly the same, is I'm just going to go straight to frame 32 and hit S, and then I've got it. A lot of what we can do to get to this frame 16, which is the left front foot contact pose, I want his cog or his root to be at about the same height. What I need to do is just reverse some of the positions and reverse some of the rotations. So I can go ahead and key at 16. So if I do this and I key at 16, I'm going to need to remember to go through everything and reverse it. If you don't, you're going to get weird pops, but we can fix those later as well. Or what I can do is I can deselect everything, hit frame 16, and just key what I know I want. So I know I want my root at about this height. So I can just key that right away. Go back to my perspective really quickly here. So on my hip swinger, I want it just the opposite. So I know I can just go up to my rotate 20 on X here, just put a negative sign in front of it, and then go ahead and just key the hips. There we go. So on my spine, I'm just going to go ahead and make this positive and just key my spine. So my shoulders, I want them to be about the same, so I'm just going to go ahead and key them. So now I'm going to go back to my left view. So I'm going to select my foot back here, and I'm going to take a look at my values, what they are. So I translated him minus 4.15 and 3.3. And on this guy is 3.215 and minus 33.8 degrees. So what I can do is I can keep jumping back from frame 0 to 16 to get these values. So I'm going to do this one first, and what I can do, 0.215, and my rotation was the 33. Oops, it's going to be negative 33 on this one. And I'm going to take the roll off. There we go. So with this foot, I'm going to hit S. So now this foot, I'm going to take the rotation off, move it to minus 4. The roll was 3.3. So that's pretty close, but I know my Z is not quite right. So I'm just going to go ahead and key this and come back here and check what it was supposed to be. 4.15. Okay. So you don't have to make the feet match exactly, but it does kind of make it easier. So now I'm going to go back to perspective, and so I just don't have to be exact. So I'm going to go like 73 and 27. So I've just gone through and selected that arm. So for my left arm here, I'm just going to go back to frame 0 and get these values. So 72 minus 16. Then go back here. And now I'm just going to hit my button here to make sure I've got everything, just in case I forgot to key anything. Hit S. Alright, so see what it looks like. So his root's he's not going up and down because his root's in the same position through these 3 contact poses. That's fine. If I right click on here and go to enabled step preview, it's going to look like this. And that's about what our walk cycle is going to look like. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save this scene as walk contact.